Welcome to the postponed October 24th. Just kidding. Meeting.
That was November 1st.
November 1st, 2023 Board of Health meeting in accordance with the governor's order superseding certain provisions of the open meeting law, Mass General Law 30A, Section 20, related to the 2020 novel coronavirus outbreak emergency. The Board of Health meeting tonight at 7 p.m. For the Board of Health shall be physically closed to the public to avoid congregation. Alternative public access to this meeting shall be utilizing the Zoom virtual meeting software, which is available on the town's website. And I think that's good enough for now. Okay. So we have no public hearings tonight. So we have Kathy in for her appointment continuing from September 26th, 2023. And I don't know, does Kathy have anything prepared for this, or are we going to, is the intent to have a discussion with John a little bit more? I know you met with Kathy, but I'm not sure if there was any outstanding issues.
I was just planning to listen in to see what you said. I still don't agree with John, and I don't see where he's coming from to say that under the potluck law, why we can't use the kitchen for that. It does not make sense to me, because in that case, why do we even have a kitchen? But I still think under that ruling, we are exempt, and it was put in, as I explained in my letter, it was put in exactly for that. That law was established exactly for that reason, for events like ours at church.
Kathy, that's understood. I think the gray area that I'm seeing is that a potluck implies that there is food being brought in, and whether it's actually laid out in the kitchen, but the bottom line is there's no preparation in the kitchen. So that's, and I think the outstanding issue is whether coffee or any other food is being prepared in the kitchen to supplement the food that's being brought in. And I think that may be the sticking point, I think, that you have. And while I understand the reasons for it, I kind of view this as pretty black and white. Either you bring food in, or you bring food in and you prepare food in the kitchen. And if the second option is what you're doing, or the second scenario is what you're doing, it's not applicable under the regulations. That's my simple understanding of this, and having read the regulations a few times, plus other food preparation regulations I've been reading too, to try and get a little more educated on this topic, because this is not in my wheelhouse.
So you're saying that the Board of Health, it goes along, that's the way you're interpreting the law also.
This is my interpretation. I mean, there's two other members, and I mean, this is something that we can discuss more, which I would encourage we do that. At the same time, as all boards do in town and every place else that I've that I've been a consultant with other towns, where you're the expert for that board. You provide the information, and then that's John's position here, and then the board then votes on or agrees with it of the requirement. And again, Kathy, I did go back and watch the first meeting we had, and I just want to be very clear. We're not singling out the organization. We're not singling out the people. What's being governed here by regulation is the process that's being done with the food. So it's a stretch to say that the church is being singled out, the individuals are being singled out. It's simply just the process, and it's nothing more than that. So I'm not sure that that's your understanding of it, but that's my understanding of this.
I don't think I felt that we were being singled out. I just didn't, as I said, I didn't agree with the ruling, because it says I'm trying to find my paperwork here. As I wrote in the response, we are not a food establishment that sells food. So therefore, we are not under the Board of Health ruling when it comes to these events. Whereas John is saying because the kitchen is licensed, we can't use it for these events. It doesn't, as I could say, I just don't agree with that.
And believe me, I understand what you're saying, but the thing is that the way the regulations in general are written is there's a certain amount of leeway of interpretation for this, but at the same time, there are things that are pretty straightforward. And I'm going to say that this is a case where you can't be bringing food in, working and serving it for consumption, at the same time using the licensed kitchen for supplementing the food you're bringing in. There has to be a very clear division of the process, and that's kind of where I want to stay there. I mean, I don't want to argue minutia, and I don't want to argue points, and I don't want to sort of bring up all these hypotheticals, but this is my understanding of how the regulation is intended to work. And I think John is probably in the same arena. I think he may have a little bit more detail because of his experience of doing this for as long as he has. And I just can't say that. I mean, this is the first case or second case that we've dealt with this food matter in town. So that's kind of where we are. So if any other members do have comments or questions, feel free to chime in. And John, if you're taking notes or if you want to add anything, feel free to do so.
I'm happy to provide some information I have. I don't know if other members have questions first, or if you want me to go ahead with what I have tonight.
Krista, you came off mute. Do you want to talk first?
No, that's okay.
Okay.
All right. So I just, and I'm trying to look into this to find backing one way or the other to either support my position or show me that there's a different way to approach this. So we've done a couple of things in the office. We reached out to the legal counsel for the Mass Association of Health Boards. Unfortunately, she was unavailable and will get back to us. So I don't have anything from her at the moment. I also had a Zoom meeting with the leadership at the Food Protection Program for DPH. So they shared that DPH and their legal people have made a determination that they will not comment on the potluck law because it's a Mass General law and DPH does not have jurisdiction over it. So that doesn't really help us solve the issue, but it does just kind of speak to, we would turn to DPH for guidance on food regulations. So we reached out for that. I also was looking for other health departments and other positions on this matter. So I came across Concord and Westford have their posted on their websites some versions of how they approach potluck events. I think they have some good language that might speak a little clearer than I have, as I've talked about events being open to the public. I think was part of my position on this. Again, I don't have a problem with a potluck, but I think the things we're talking about are not potlucks. But I do think, as I mentioned, Concord and Westford had these advisories listed. Betsy was able to also find very similar language posted in Wayland. My thought is if the board wants to take a look at these and agrees that maybe it would be helpful to the community to adopt a similar position and post it on the Norfolk website. And then we could also post resources for groups who are going to hold potluck events in what I believe is the true sense of the potluck. I also forwarded the board a couple of cases of foodborne illness outbreaks that came out of potluck events. So I don't think that really helps speak to what the regulation is, but I think it speaks to the importance of food safety. One of these church events, one of the parishioners died from the foodborne outbreak. So I do think, there's a food safety aspect to it. My point in bringing this forward and trying to do the research and speak to this is twofold. One, I believe that the board and the town have an obligation to enforce the food code, and that if we don't, we're neglecting our duties. And two, there are real foodborne risks here, and that, I just want to make sure we're doing the right thing and keeping the community safe. I don't think turning a blind eye to let something happen because it's well-intentioned does I think doing that is a disservice to the community. So that's why I want to share that information with the board. So I think the other point that I had is, if we're going to enforce this in the community, that we have to be consistent. If we let one thing slide and then the next group comes along and we feel that is that we need to enforce having a permit and following the food code, if we're not doing that consistently, I think that weakens the board's authority. So that's what I had to share tonight, kind of some updates and some information, but so then I don't know if I can answer any questions, or if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, I think to your point, John, like that's what I've been having the hardest time with, is when I look at it as it's baked goods and it's coffee, like two things that are very unlikely to be things that are causing foodborne illness, not like chicken and other items, but it's the setting the precedent of, we can say that like, yes, it's fine at this event because they're serving these two things. But to your point, if we approve it once, then how do you not let someone else do the same thing? That's certainly where I'm having the hardest time with it, is because these two instances seem so benign. Like the most dangerous thing about the coffee is really like the creamer, not necessarily the coffee itself, is much less of a risk factor. But you have all those other items that go along with it that can be more dangerous. And I just think it's really unfair for the state of Massachusetts to not be giving more like definitive answers. Because like I don't necessarily read it the same way that you do. Like I don't, but if they're not giving us a black and white answer, like that's just it's not fair. I've tried to reach out to them as well and have not gotten any response whatsoever. So I just think it's unfortunate, but it's hard to want to override something that then could in the future, come back to hurt us when someone wants to do it for something that could be more dangerous.
Sure. And if you don't mind, if I could just respond to that a little bit, I agree with what you're saying, right? And I am frustrated as well with the wording in the law. I think there is some clear conflict in the Mass General Law uses the term business establishment. The food code does not use that term. It uses the term food establishment, and that is regardless of whether or not money is exchanged for the food. And that's kind of the point I keep going back to. And so the food establishment has requirements, and that's why I'm talking about food can't come from residential kitchens. My second point to your comments is I agree that coffee and baked goods are lower risk, but that's not the only thing we're talking about. The church is holding luncheons and other events where more complex foods occur, as well as coffee and baked goods.
But that's what this particular instance is. They want to use the coffee machine from the approved kitchen, during the things where they're having the baked goods that get brought in. Like that specifically was my understanding of what this conversation was around, not around their other food events.
Well, so and I know that Kathy is on the call, and I don't want to put words in her mouth. But my understanding was at our meeting recently that she's talking about all of the church events. And if she can correct me, I don't want to put words in her mouth.
And that's correct. No, initially I came because, I got the directive for my particular group that we could no longer bring baked goods from home. But then when I did talk to John, because it does apply to all the church events where we are bringing in different foods from home. But also, in reading the background for the potluck law, that's what it was called. But when you look up the definition of potluck, it's when it's bringing food to share. So I don't know why these things wouldn't come under that law. And then also I found in talking about whether or not a resident kitchen had to be licensed, and when it talked about a residential kitchen cooking food to go to a charity, it says no permit is required, even if the residential kitchen is preparing foods that pose a food safety risk. So that's, as I say, talking about foods at home and going to a charity. So I still question the point. And as far as, a case where someone has lost their life from such an event, I mean, people lose their lives from eating something in a restaurant, but you don't close all restaurants. So that's why I'm having a hard time understanding.
Okay. Liz, do you have any comments or thoughts?
I just kind of agree overall that we have to be consistent. If we're doing it for one function or one activity, we have to do it across the board. I do think maybe the board needs to sit down and rewrite the language so that we don't have to keep debating this over and over again with different organizations, to have a specific Norfolk law or abridged version of it so that we can avoid the back and forth, because each person has their own point, but I agree we have to be consistent. And if John is the expert, I'm going to have to defer to him. I tried going through this 100-page thing that you sent us, when it was harder than my medical school stuff to get through with all the nuances. So there's so many ifs, ands, or buts in it that I think I need to defer to the expert with what his experience is and what he has researched.
Okay. Liz, to your point, I think the fact if we were to create a bylaw for Norfolk, I think that would be somewhat counterproductive. But I think a policy for the Board of Health would probably be better, because essentially a bylaw would have to go through many iterations, and
whatever would make it more specific, so it didn't have lend to so much interpretation.
Yep.
For us specifically is what I was referring to.
Yeah. And John, just so you know, I would like to avoid using the word guidelines for a variety of reasons, because
yes,
guidelines are very tough to enforce. But if it's a policy of the board, and then you have to have backup for that. But I mean, the goal is to be consistent, and so I'm not sure if we can. I don't think we can hash this out tonight, but I think if we could have a working session and talk about this, and if we could, if people have comments, funnel those through Betsy to get to John on things we'd like to see. I think that will probably be moving this in the right direction. So I think in the short term, I guess no decision can be made right now or tonight. But at the same time, I think we really probably need to get this taken care of over the next 60 to 90 days. I think that's going to be reasonable. If we could maybe even speed it up, that would be great too. But and Christy, to your point, the regulations, not just this, all regulations are never black and white. They're subject to interpretation unless there's a physical number that's backed up by scientific data. That's the only way. And I'm saying that from from the environmental regulations I deal with, and that's something that you kind of have to use your best judgment. And believe me, this is not an easy decision, because yes, these regulations are so old that they haven't gone through the the 20, 30 iterations over the past 2 decades to try and get it cleaned up and squared away. So yeah, we're sort of at the mercy of the lack of initiative that these boards didn't do 10 years ago, when some of these issues started coming up of absolutely needing food safety issues to address. So anyways, Kathy, I think we're going to probably have to leave you hanging here in limbo here for a bit. I'm not sure what that means in terms of any kind of action on your end or enforcement, or just sort of keep doing what you're doing, but try and, I think you kind of know what our hot buttons are, and if you can try and avoid getting into that gray area, that might be helpful. But again, I trust you can understand our quandary that we're in, and I can say this is not an easy lift for the board to undertake in such a short amount of time, simply because there's not just you, there's other organizations in town that do fall under this. So that's all I have to say at this point. And I don't know if the other board members want to try and hash out some sort of numbers or a schedule or a calendar, or if like I said, or send comments to Betsy, who can funnel those to John. We can start there. I think that may be the way to go.
I'd also like to hear what I forget the name of the person John reached out to for some expertise. I'd like to hear what they have to say as well. The first person you discussed.
When I talked about the food protection program. So
yes. You
sorry.
reached out to someone you said you hadn't heard back from yet.
Oh, sorry. Correct.
Just like to hear what their thoughts were.
Yep, I think that will be helpful. And they may be able to hopefully give a little straighter answer than DPH having their hands tied.
Kathy, any closing thoughts? Or are you
no, no, thank you. I mean, I know you're trying to do what is best, but I just like to say, store-bought food gets expensive for one thing, and for another thing, in reality, home cooked food is much often healthier than all the preservatives in the purchased items.
Agreed. I mean, anything that's packaged and processed and frozen, and yep, no, I agree, and that's an issue. So,
could I ask a question? I'm Eleanor Osborne, and I'm a member of Emmanuel Baptist Church.
Sure, go ahead.
Church where Kathy is. What is our permit to operate a food establishment for? What does it allow us to do rather than not to do? What does it allow us to do? Because I've been attending this church since 1987, and I've been a member since 96. And it says, in accordance with regulations promulgated under authority of Chapter 95, Section 305A, and Chapter 111, Section 5 of the general laws, a permit is hereby granted to our admin, whose place of business is EBC, type of business, and any restrictions, church kitchen, limited food handling. So what does that allow us legally to do with that permit in our kitchen?
John, I will defer to you for the nuances of that.
Sure. So when we issue a permit, we ask about what types of activities occur in the food establishment, be it a church or a restaurant or a deli or anything like that, and we approve the permit. In this case, it's listed as limited food handling because the kitchen is not set up as a commercial food handling kitchen. In general, it would be bringing food in from approved sources, plating it, maybe some limited preparation of food for immediate service. You do have a stove there, you do have refrigeration there. I don't, and it would be more of a permitting conversation. I don't think you have the facilities or the structure to make large quantities of food, cool it down, and store it for long periods of time. So I'm trying to give you the quick, short answer. Does that make sense, or am I missing something?
Well, are we allowed to make coffee and serve coffee on a Sunday morning and
Yes.
put out baked goods?
Baked goods from an approved source, yes.
So what's an approved source?
So I mean, that's kind of
that's the big question.
Right. An
So
approved
it's
source.
okay if we have
sorry.
a meeting and there's just something about giving people an opportunity to chat after the church service or at a meeting to be able to put out coffee. And with coffee, I drink it black, but other people have creamers, half and half or non-dairy creamers. Are we allowed to serve that if they've been refrigerated, or do we buy those little containers that come individually packed, which is what we did during COVID when we started serving coffee again, and individually wrapped baked goods? I guess I just need to know, what can we do? What does this, because I tried to look up I did Mass General Laws, and it said something about the Mass General Law for the purpose of sale, which is not what we do. That was under Chapter 94, Section 305A, for the purpose of sale. So maybe I wasn't looking at the right Chapter 94. So
Sure.
if you could have it detailed out what we are allowed to do. Maybe Kathy already knows this.
Yeah, so what with the permit and what you'd be allowed under that permit, that would fall under the regulation 590, which is the merged food code, which is different than that general law that we've been talking about with Kathy. And that's kind of where I think the different positions are coming from. The food code talks about a food establishment offering and serving food regardless of if there's a fee. So you would be allowed to serve stuff from the kitchen under your permit when you're serving the public. You would just have to follow the regulations of the food code.
And that's found, do you have a copy of that?
Yeah, I can send it to you.
Okay.
I think it might be on our website, but if outside of the meeting, if you want to contact the office and give us a phone number or an email, I'm happy to send that to you.
Okay, because that's where I looked at the permit that's hanging in our kitchen, and it referenced the general law, Chapter 94, 305A, and Chapter 111, Section 5, which looked like it sounded like we were a scientific laboratory. So, which wasn't, it didn't seem to have anything to do with serving food. And, typically once in a while, I imagine, cooked food at the kitchen on the stove, but it's not a general practice. But we serve food after, say, a funeral. And I don't know if anybody's had a wedding and a reception at the church, but typically there's a collation after a funeral where people gather and they come, and usually we send out for food, like to a restaurant or a place like Roach Brothers or some place that has a catering business. And then they bring the food in and then we put the food out. So if that's in violation, I guess I just like to have a concrete list of what we are allowed to do right now by the food code. So I can email Betsy and ask her to send that to me.
Sure. Yeah. I think one important point in there is the difference between private and public events.
Right.
Right. So a private event, we're not really going to regulate. A public event where the public is welcome to come in, that's where the food code and the regulations come in.
So if there's a meeting at the church at 7 o'clock and somebody wants to bring apple pie in or apple crisp and serve it, you know, for people that are coming in from their jobs or whatever, is that allowable if it's a home baked good? Serve it with coffee?
If it's a private meeting, yes.
Okay.
But I think part of the conversation has been that the kitchen has a permit to allow for when the public is welcome, and trying to avoid bringing food in from home kitchens and serving it out of that kitchen, or serving food prepared in that kitchen alongside food from someone's home.
Okay.
That's where I've been trying to make the point that we're mixing potlucks and retail food or the food code.
So does this discussion apply to the Federated Church and St. Jude's? I don't know if they have potlucks or whatever, but you know, is this being looked into at those churches too? You know.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, and that's kind of my point earlier in the meeting. I was talking about being consistent.
Right.
So as these things come up, we're trying to address them.
Yeah.
So whatever I'm talking about is my interpretation of the food code, regardless of which organization it is. In other meetings, I gave examples of other typical community groups. I think I mentioned Boy Scouts, I mentioned Lions and other groups. The way I'm trying to present this would apply to anyone who's serving food to the public.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments from the board members? But I think if we can try and shoot, I know we kind of lost a month there, didn't it? So probably sometime, Betsy, are we scheduled to, looking at the schedule, we'll have the meeting on the 28th. All the other board members can make that on November 28th. I mean, if we can, I'd say over the next 2 weeks, if we can get something, questions, comments to Betsy, one of those to John, and hopefully you can make some heads or tails and work on a consistency aspect of a policy. I think that probably would be the first start. And then the day after Christmas, I'm not quite sure, Betsy, that's going to work for everybody, but we can talk about that.
Okay, well, our next meeting will be the November 28th then.
Okay. So if Liz, if you have comments, Chris, if you have comments, things to try and make this work, things that need to be clarified, just make it a stream of thought, bullet items, just get those to Betsy and get those so get those to John, and we'll try and start a basis of something, and I'll let Betsy, weed through if there's repetition or if there's duplicates, we can kind of combine them as appropriate. So then go from there. So Kathy, any last words? I know we've been seeing a lot of you the past couple months, so and I'm quite sure you'd like to get this resolved.
No, again, I just say thank you. I didn't intend to speak tonight. I was just going to listen in, but I would just be going over the same things. I think I will reach out to the state though and see if I can get some clarification too, although I don't know how far I'll get, but.
Well, Kathy, I think you're part of, you're part of this solution. So I mean, any input you have, I view as important. So it's not, it's not a case of, we're just having you come along to listen. I mean, I think just the interactive and the some sort of dialogue that is heading towards a direction. I think, think the fact we've decided that, well, the suggestion came up that a policy is probably the way to go, is probably going to clarify a lot of things and help with the consistency. And I think that's the critical thing that we need to do for this. So
Thank you.
okay, thank you. Eleanor, any last questions? Any comments? We all
No,
set?
thank you very much for letting me ask what I did. I know I'm kind of late to the meetings, but it's something we want to do what's right, but we also have a lot of people that come to the church and they're not in the position of authority, but we know they like their coffee, they like to get their baked goods after the church service. We have usually a little fellowship hour, and like I said, I've been an attendee of the church since 1987, thanks to Kathy, because we moved in across the street from her. And anyway, so I can't, and I've been involved in the hospitality at the church pretty much the whole time. So,
Okay.
I want to make sure we're doing things right. I just want to understand a little more about what our permit allows us to do and make sure we're doing it right. So it's not like we're willy-nilly in the kitchen. We have, notices up about the hand washing policy and using the gloves and all of that. So I can't say everybody does everything all the time because I'm not there all the time, but it is an important part of a church congregation. It sounds a little bit trivial sometimes, but believe it or not, it's a big part of gatherings. Everybody likes to have their coffee or whatever. So I appreciate all you do for the town.
Okay. Well, thank you.
And I'm sending an email to Betsy, so she'll have the request.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, shall we move on? Review and approve meeting minutes from 9/26. I reviewed them. Nothing stood out for me. I don't know if the other two members had read them. If you're good with those.
Yep, I didn't have any issues.
I didn't have a problem with anything on it.
Okay.
All right. Do you want me to make a motion to accept the minutes from last week as they stand?
Please do.
All right, we'll make a motion to accept the minutes from last, I don't know what the date was. September 26th. As they stand, no corrections needed.
I'll second that. All in favor, say aye. Andy Bakanowski, aye.
Christy.
Hi,
Brown.
Liz Gebhard. Oh, sorry.
Do we need to do it again?
Good. I heard both ayes, so we're good.
You're fine.
We're good. So new business by John, inspections.
You're breaking
audio
up a little,
keeps
Andy.
Going out, Andy.
Oh, sorry. I'm no, battery's still good. Can you hear me okay now?
Yep, you're fine.
Okay. So next new business updates from John, food establishment inspections.
Sorry, sorry, I wasn't ready for that. I had to get back on.
I'm sorry.
I don't really have much in the way of an update. Been spending a lot of time on the question we just addressed earlier. Continue to do routine inspections and re-inspections and follow up with the operators.
Okay. Okay. John, in terms of your timing of things, just you'll have you'll have time to work on any questions, comments, to hopefully break this into a policy, or break it into the foundation of a policy. Because I think that's, you know, again, I looked around as well, couldn't find necessarily any other policies in other towns, but you know, I'm not saying we're heading to new territory here, but I think, you know, I'd like to try and avoid having a guideline, just because of the interpretation that can come with, where I think a policy is better. And I know it's a long word versus a small word, but I think that's the way we should probably be looking at it. So
yeah, I think this is an important topic, and that you know, I'll make time to work on that. I think it'd be beneficial to all the parties to have a guideline, so that everyone knows what the playing field is and what we're all working, a policy. I don't want to use the word guideline either.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, we're all on the same playing field, and being consistent. So I think short term it's a little time consuming, but I think it's in the long term interest. So I will make time to work on it.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
Next up, Matt. Updates the well regulations. I know you and I've kind of passed in the hallway a few times over the past couple months, and I know we've chatted briefly, but what do you have to report to us?
As far as the well regulations, I think hopefully once the septic in Title V slows down, hopefully it'll slow down a little bit like it normally does. Come January, maybe we can sit down and actually get some type of hard draft worked out. I have some, as you do, some thoughts on the PFAS portion of the regulations, and hopefully we can bring the DPW in to discuss some of the irrigation well issues as well, because I know that they Barry had wanted some input as well. So hopefully the next couple of months we can get something hashed out. Repair's been certainly steady. Perks have been steady. New construction, the Village of Norfolk is finally wrapping up. I think we have one COC left to issue for that project, and that'll be complete. Avery Way is moving along steadily. Lakeland Hills is just coming online. It's a new subdivision off Seekonk Street, and I believe it's Cranberry Estates over towards Buckley Man, I believe. I just had some discussion yesterday that they'll be submitting perk apps for some of the lots once the new construction season starts in December. So be a little bit busy with some new construction, which is good. Other than that, everything has been steady but good.
Okay, Matt, were they doing perk tests in the past couple of weeks over at Cranberry Meadows?
No, they've been doing some tree clearings, that way they can get machines in and figure out where they want to do the perks come December.
Okay.
Talked to Nick Bailey yesterday. That's what we were discussing. So as far as I know, they haven't done any. If they did, it's just been some exploration soils, just maybe to see what might be the best locations to perk, but nothing official. They haven't submitted any applications yet to us.
Okay. 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 Next topic, Southwood Hospital. I think between the last meeting and this one, there was a planning board meeting that the MAPC had proposed. I don't know if any other members watched that. Josh Fila with MAPC presented, and I did send him an email just sort of commenting on it, and of the two things that really were kind of a little bit disconnected, and I was a little more diplomatic in my wording to him, but it is a disconnect, because the timing of all this versus the cleanup of the site, and the cleanup of the site is somewhere 3 to 5 years from now. And it seems like the way they've presented this development is that this is going to be right around the corner, and it's just not realistic, because they still have not identified the full extent of contamination at the property. And for the other board members, which I know you probably haven't read the recent report from August, but there's 6 monitoring wells with several feet of number 6 fuel oil in it, and there's other wells with anywhere from a trace to a sheen. And the work that was done as part of the landfill inspection, and the Conservation Commission met after our meeting and or after that meeting with the planning board, and to put monitoring wells in, and there's going to be a lot of monitoring wells going in to identify that contamination as well as others. So, and then the other thing that was pretty frustrating, because I had talked with Josh about this probably almost 2 years ago, is that putting a development plan over where the known contamination is on the property. If you've been by the property, you can see the buildings from the roadway, but essentially everything more or less to the, I'll call it the center of the building, and to the right, which is the south side, that's where a lot of the oil is underground, and then the other contamination associated with the landfill still has not been defined, but again, that's towards the south. And then the other lingering issue is the radiation that was found in some of the filter beds for the former wastewater plant that's no longer in use, and that's something that wasn't mentioned at the Conservation Commission meeting, which I'm aware of. That the PIP group, the public group that's sort of watching things, did bring that up to the Conservation Commission. So I don't know where that stands in terms of action, but that's something that's kind of important. And since we're talking about food and the Department of Public Health, well, radiation contamination in the soil is associated with the Department of Public Health. It's under their regulations. And if you think the food stuff is messed up, believe me, the radiation stuff is more messed up too. It's very difficult to follow. And radiation is not something I've done a lot of work on, but it's really kind of, it's convoluted and highly subjective, and it just shows you how difficult regulations can be. So, but that's about it for Buckley Man. I have nothing on. I'm sorry, for Southwood on Buckley Man. I have nothing, no new, unless there's been any recent activity by that potential developer that was interested in it, interested in doing some work out there. So, but next topic, the next meeting, 11/28/23. I trust that'll be okay for everybody, unless I know that's just after Thanksgiving, unless, if anybody says they need some time off from work or they're gonna be away, let us know now so we can adjust that. And then we'll talk Christmas, the one after Christmas on the 28th. Yeah. Okay. So, okay.
Sorry, just for the December meeting,
Yeah.
I mean, December's so busy, would we be better off trying to pick a date and get something on the calendar now? Or are we just gonna skip it? I know I'm gonna get insanely busy, and I don't want to not be able to attend because I don't know when it will be.
Was that's a good point, because I can tell you right now, the 26th, I mean, between Christmas and New Year's, I'm not sure where I'll be. I mean, I will have internet service, but again, sure, being able to, have all the things I need to attend a meeting and be productive, that kind of just raises a question for me. So yeah, that's legitimate. But then again, if we're meeting on the 28th of November, if we meet in 2 weeks, how much work can get done and how much stuff will get advanced? So I think that's, I mean, does it make sense to try and move it to, right after the first of the year? I mean, that may be worth exploring. Maybe we can think about that and talk about that. I just don't think anything. Betsy, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, do you want to maybe think about pushing it off until January, after the first of the year?
I'd be open for that. Yeah. I just think that if we have a meeting at the end of November and then another one 2 weeks later, it's probably not as productive of time.
And like January 2nd will still be almost 4 full weeks before. Yeah. Oh, well, it's the 4th Tuesday. It's not the last.
It's okay. Is everybody available on January 2nd?
I will. Yeah.
Yeah, I can be.
Okay. I'm going to shoot for.
I'm good with that.
Sorry, I don't mean to be a pain. I just know if we wait until like the end of November.
No, yeah, no, believe it's the holidays are all my schedule around. So yeah.
Okay, let's try for January 2nd.
Okay. So any unanticipated new business that may come before the board? I'll be honest with you, I got cornered by two people in the town hall. They were fascinated by this food discussion, and I was going to give us a brief summary of the Energy Committee at town meeting on the 14th, and made me think it might be good to try and maybe give a first time ever update at town meeting with the Board of Health and bringing up this whole food issue. Because a lot of people just don't know, and I think some people may take it by surprise. So if there's no objection to the board, I can make a 2-minute presentation on what's going on, what we're doing, and what we're trying to do, just so people are aware of it. You call it a public education thing, but it's probably won't be well attended, but at least it'll be out there. People can see what's going on. I could send a brief statement to Betsy, and I'll let her use the other methods. Feel free to comment on that if that's okay. If you think that it's too premature, the time spot with Jake Hallerman complained about. So if you think that's I guess call it transparency to a certain degree, but also simply it's just communication and letting people know what's going on. The two biggest, I'm not going to call it complaints, but observations people have made is that why is this happening now? And I pointed out that we never had anybody like John, in our support role. So now he's in there, and someone can do it. I mean, the laws have been on the books for well over 2 decades. It's something that we as a town have not been. So I think that's the change. And I want to make that point clear that it wasn't something that just sort of arbitrarily came up. Just was always on the books, and never any enforcement because no one was checking on this.
So I'm going to send you guys, Wayland Board of Health has guidelines for potluck meals on their website. And it's interesting. One of the things it says is they are one-time, one-location events. Foods may be prepared at home. These events do not require a permit. So
not a repeating event.
Right. They are one-time, one-location events. So I'm actually I'll email that to you guys right now.
Betsy, is there a time period for that? I mean, is it once a year or?
No, it just says one-time events. That's what qualifies for a potluck.
So you basically have to be moving from you could essentially have an annual potluck meal, but you'd have to move it from location to location every year. Would that then suffice?
It doesn't really say, but let's see if I can. I'll try to email that to you. Might have to do it tomorrow. So anyway, I thought that was interesting.
Okay.
Well, I think it's a good idea if you talk at the oh god, sorry.
No, was it Westwood and Concord were the other two towns that John said had like good
Concord,
things?
Yes, it was. I just looked at them.
Yeah, Westford.
Oh, you're a better multitasker.
Westford and Concord, yeah.
Yeah.
But I was just going to say, I think it's probably a good idea to talk at the town meeting, just so people don't think they're being singled out, that, we're just trying to adhere to the rules that are already there and make sense of them so that they're consistent for everyone.
Yeah. And Liz, basically what you're saying is what I would say. It's just that, people think that, okay, what's this new rule coming out? It's like, well, it's been on the books for a while, and I know it's important. It's important to, one, make sure that that the distribution of food and consumption of food at these functions are, have some oversight. Sometimes, it might be a little bit too much for some people, but at the same time, there's a need. I mean, you just need that one or two people to get really sick, and that's that can happen. And I can't speak, from firsthand experience, but yes, I've read things in the paper. I've read things in various journals and other things. So we need to be consistent like that. Okay.
Like everything, it's a work in progress.
Yep. Krista, your thoughts on talking town meeting? Any?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay.
I won't be there. I'm on vacation.
Okay. Anybody else? John, Matt, any closing comments, any thoughts on your end before we wrap this up?
I do not.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Okay. Who wants to make a motion to adjourn?
I can make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Okay, and I'll second. Okay, we'll adjourn the Board of Health meeting at 7:58 on November 1st. Andy Bakunowski, aye.
Liz Gephardt, aye.
Christy Burns, aye.
Good night, everybody.